Let's ensure in this clip that you know the different types of version control systems. This knowledge is important for you to understand how Git works. There are actually three types of version control systems: local, centralized, and distributed. Git is a distributed version control system. To understand what a distributed version control system actually means, let's look at these three types, and let's start with local version control systems. In a local version control system, you have a so-called version database on your computer. This version database stores different versions of your source code. From that version database, you can get a file for a specific version. This is also known as a checkout. Of course, if you have a whole folder structure with multiple files, you get that whole structure for a specific version. In this case here, let's assume we have just a simple file and you can grab it with a specific version from the version database. Now, important to understand is that all of this happens locally on your computer. That is the reason why it is called a local version control system. It is powerful to track your code changes locally, but it does not support to work together with other developers on the same code base. Working together with other developers is where centralized version control systems come into play. With a centralized version control system, you have also a version database. But here, the version database is not stored on your computer. Instead, it is located on a central server. This central server is the reason why it is called centralized version control systems. On your computer, you can check out and work on a specific version of your source code. Another user can also check out a version of the source code. This means that with this centralized version control system, you can now work together with other developers on your projects. But as you can see, on your computer, you have only a specific version. To look, for example, at the history of your source code, or to save changes to your source code, you need a connection to the server. This means without the server, you cannot use the features of the version database. And this is exactly the point where distributed version control systems enter the stage. In a distributed version control system, you have also a server, but let's call that not central server, but instead server computer. It is just another computer that has the version database. Now, on the client computers, you don't check out a single version of the source code. Instead of this, you copy the whole version database to your computer. So, you can see the version database is distributed across multiple computers. This is the reason why it is called a distributed version control system. Now, as I mentioned already at the beginning of this clip, Git is a distributed version control system. In Git, the version database is called a repository. The different versions are identified by commits. A commit means that you saved a change of your source code. When you copy the repository from the server to your computer, it means in Git terms that you clone the repository to your machine. Now, the user on computer 2 can also clone the repository from the server computer to their machine. So, you see, the repository is not only on the central server, instead it is distributed to the different computers. To work now with the source code, the user on computer 1 can check out a specific version from their local repository. The user on computer 2 can also check out a specific version from their local repository. Having the repository locally means that a user does not need the server to work with the repository. They can browse the history, they can check out different versions, and they can even save changes. And all of this is possible without using the server. Let's say now that the user on computer 2 creates a new commit to save some changes to the source code. Next, they can push their local repository to the remote repository on the server. After this push, the remote repository on the server will also have that new commit. The user on computer 1 can now pull the changes from the server, and then they will have that new commit also in their local repository. So this is the coding flow with a distributed version control system like Git. In this course, you will learn about cloning a repository and about pushing and pulling changes. The server computer that we will use is github.com. There you can create remote repositories for free. But before working with a remote repository on github.com, you will learn how to work with Git locally on your machine. With Git, you can start with a local repository and you can commit your changes there and learn how to use Git on your machine. At a later stage, you can push your local repository to a remote repository, for example on github.com. This is actually what we will do in this course. Alright, now you learned about the 3 types of version control systems: local, centralized, and distributed. In the next clip, let's ensure that you understand the origin of Git.